Hello everyone and welcome to episode 28 of Marking the Role. Today's episode is called The Curriculum, Ideology and Politics in the Classroom. We don't look at how things are being taught, but we're actually going to have a look at what students are being taught and what you as teachers are being asked to teach. Now, I look back when I was teaching, and I don't want to romanticise it because I know that we didn't do everything well at all. Some things I know I did very badly, and maths was my real nemesis. But we never actually drilled in ideology and political belief to the students. It just didn't happen. But now it seems that ideology and belief systems and even politics is being taught to students. We know that in Australia we have the voice vote coming up, and I think that all of the departments have chosen to back the yes vote. Now, I'm not sure whether they're going to be giving equal to no. I'm really unsure of the whole thing. But I know that teachers have to teach certain aspects of history which they may not agree with. They have to teach certain aspects of gender behaviour which they may not agree with. And I had a voicemail left during the week, and I'm going to say it's from Kerry, that's not her real name. And as you'll hear, her message has been changed using artificial intelligence. She doesn't complain that much about the departments, but she's certainly having something to say about the union.
I've been a primary teacher in New South Wales for 16 years. I realise that the curriculum is skewed at times, but I also know whoever pays the piper names the tune. Most of us just add bits and pieces to even out the politically correct stuff. I've also been a Teachers Federation member for 16 years, and have gone on strike with the best of them. I'm now horrified to see that the Federation is urging teachers to recognise Transgender Day, and even include the Stonewall riots in their history lessons. The Federation also has a library of 191 LGBTQI books that teachers can borrow for their class, even if the school refuses to have them in their library. Some of the books have been banned for schools in the UK and USA. I can tolerate being told what to teach by those who pay me, but to be preached to by my union is too much. I will not be including any of this in my programs.
Now, this podcast has supported the New South Wales Teachers Federation in most things, not with all things. I've even interviewed Henry Rajendra, the Vice President of the Federation. Really nice guy. I thought I'd fact check what Kerry said, and yes, there are those resources on the Federation site. And yes, I did check on one of the books that seemingly had been banned, but I can't say for the rest of them. There's a lot of them there. But it does seem that from all directions, from the departments, from the federations, from minority activist groups, there is pressure for teachers to teach certain political ideas and certain ideologies, some of which they may disagree with, not just the politics, but perhaps even gender identity stuff, which I know teachers have to teach about. But many teachers believe that this sort of teaching belongs in the home. To find out more about all this and what can be done, and if there is any checks and balances, I spoke to Colleen Harkin. Colleen is a research fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs. She's the National Manager of Class Action Programs. So she deals directly with teachers and schools about programs that can ensure balance in certain curriculums, like the history curriculum. And I started up by asking her what I always ask of my guests, to tell us about her education and teaching history.
Phil, I have a master's degree in education and a Bachelor of Education and a grad dip in high incidence learning difficulties, and a diploma of teaching is what I first started out with, which was the original teaching qualification of the day. It was a 3-year course. I believe that's now 4. But yeah, sort of lots of, stacks on the mill in terms of education qualifications.
Okay, and you look after the class action resources for the Institute of Public Affairs. What exactly are they?
I do. The class action program is an outreach program to parents and teachers where we are writing and providing balanced curriculum on subjects mostly in the history, civics and citizenship subject areas, primary and secondary school, to provide teachers with some resources that provide a more sort of, balanced and optimistic perspective of our country and where we've been and how we came to be here.
So when you say a more balanced perspective, what is the other perspective that you're trying to balance?
Well, we've done a full review of the national curriculum, and your listeners can find that on the Institute of Public Affairs website. It's under our research papers, and it's called De-Educating Australia. So we've done a full audit of the entire version 9 of the national curriculum that's being rolled out around the country. And it is really comprehensive and unrelenting indoctrination. The curriculum has what they call these cross-curriculum priorities, which is sustainability and Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders histories and cultures. And every subject at every year level is taught through the prism of those priorities. So the result of that means that instead of what education being, a system based of knowledge and facts, it is entirely underpinned and ideologically driven. So that means that in some areas, for example, in history, the students are taught that really Australia, was founded on white supremacy and oppression, and that, that we are a systemically racist country, but Aboriginal Australians, for example, by virtue of their race, are oppressed, and these sorts of, underlying themes run right through the curriculum, all the way through. So, our intention.
Do they go as far as to call it Invasion Day, Australia Day?
They do. And so, grade 4 is when the children start to learn about the First Fleet. But that comes after grade 3, where they are taught the concept of invasion. And they're also sort of, it talks about dispossession, massacres and genocide, and that they're basically indoctrinated to this, thinking that this is not a country that, that we can be proud of. And it starts very early in the curriculum.
Gee, no wonder the kids are depressed. So some important aspects of Australian history, for example, what happened to the convicts after they were let out of their sentence, is being left out due to ideological reasons, do you think?
Entirely. So Australian history is compulsory for Year 9 students, which is a great thing, but it neglects to mention Captain Cook at all. Captain Cook only gets mentioned once by name in the entire national curriculum, and that's for grade 4 students. And after, as I've already said, they learn of the concept of invasion. So I don't know how you can learn Australian history without having a good understanding of Captain Cook and who he was and what he did, and the capabilities that he had. So, it is very much a unbalanced view of our history. Some people call it a black-armed view of our history, and it is, they are definitely taught that, colonisation was an invasion, and that it resulted in dispossession, massacres, genocide, and there's nothing to be proud of there.
If we take one of the resources, say the one you mentioned, which is Captain James Cook, brilliant navigator and intrepid traveller, or destructive coloniser. So what are some of the, what's it about? What are some key points from it?
So that's a recent lesson plan unit that we've launched, and it takes students through, of the times, what was happening in the times, what were contemporaneous explorers doing, what was known about, the land down under at the time, what was the relationship between England and France, so that students have some kind of understanding of, this happens very quickly. Like, this is a unit that is, like 101 Australian history, if you know what I mean. It's not deep and, it interrogates everything with great detail. The idea of this is if they never hear of Captain Cook again, they at least have a good understanding without, labouring it too much. But they walk through, how did it come to be that he was even exploring this neck of the woods, so to speak. What were his skill sets? What was his view of the Aboriginal people? What did he say about it? And it gives them, the good, the bad and the ugly in short term. And it walks them through the scenario to sort of say, well, in more recent times, he's seen as a coloniser. Was he even a coloniser? Like, he was actually dead before the first fleet arrived. And it gives them the information that they can make up their own mind as to what, was he a brilliant navigator or an intrepid traveller or a destructive coloniser, armed with the facts. And so they really don't get that level of information anywhere else.
And what about Captain Arthur Phillip? How's he treated?
Pretty much not at all. Similarly, our Australian history is pretty much ghosted in the current curriculum. Because everything is viewed through the prism of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' perspectives. The Western civilization influences good and bad achievements are really sort of quarantined quite significantly out of the curriculum.
So you're not actually saying that this should replace any of the ideology about, the Indigenous, but this should be in addition to that. So they should be actually teaching both views, in other words.
The challenge here is that the representation of the Indigenous community at the time is very romantic. Living in utopia, nothing was ever a problem.
Yeah, never any fighting.
Until the infanticide. There is no reflection at all of anything other than a perfect community until white man came along and destroyed it all. That's the sort of overriding tone. Now, obviously, history can be pretty ugly, so there's no intention to whitewash any of the problems or any of the things that are not to be proud of. But by the same token, there is an enormous amount to be grateful and proud of, and that the students need to learn it all. There is no value in having such a biased perspective of our history.
No, my great-great-great-great-grandfather carried Captain Arthur Phillip ashore on his shoulders, so Phillip didn't get his legs wet. As a convict, he was chosen to do that because he was, well, I don't know why he was, but he was. There's been books written about Henry Cable and it's a great part of our family's history, and I would hate to see anything like that taken away from the majority of Australians.
Well, we just actually, as we speak, are launching a very quick unit for students on just 10 significant achievements in Australian history. And you mentioned Cable, and that's one of them.
Really?
Henry Cable. Yeah, just a very quick understanding for students to say, this is the basis of our law, that even convicts were considered equal citizens with equal rights under law. One rule for everybody. Now, that's a very foundational perspective and, the way our country developed. And, either the convicts are sort of, a lot of people don't know that they did have the same rights under law. Yeah. And that how we've developed as a society is actually really impressive. We've got a lot to be proud of. Women, the earliest in the world for the women to have the right to vote. There's lots of things. And so that's a 10 sort of lesson scenario for students to go through and learn, quickly 101, what are some great things about Australia? Because the curriculum is so negative. So negative.
It's so unbalanced. Now, have you had much pushback by activists or just ideological parents?
No, not really. As our resources get out, they grow in demand. People sort of, and it's growing organically with people finding out that they exist. We've had a few that haven't been too, associations that haven't been too helpful in getting them out there, but for the most part, it is growing organically, and people are picking them up, knowing that, finding out that they're there and going, oh, this is terrific, thank you.
And so teachers are on side with them?
Yes, we actually, and again, it's an organically growing thing about making contact with teachers and getting them out there. The work that we're doing, just to put it into context, we are able to cite the national curriculum markers that say that this is where this complies with the national curriculum. So we're not asking any teachers to, move away from the professional responsibilities of their job. We have found the areas where it talks about, for example, parts of our history where we can say, well, this isn't covered and this is the skill set that the national curriculum refers to, and here's how we can fit it in. So it lists the requirements that a teacher has to tick the box for. It's compliance with the national curriculum. It just happens to not be in there at the moment in terms of content.
Marking the Role is supported entirely through subscribers and donors. We are the only podcast for teachers in Australia that confronts the difficult topics in education, topics others won't touch. Your subscription will ensure we can keep looking at the big issues. The cost of $35 per year gives you 2 subscriber-only podcasts, a Marking the Role coffee cup and the option to ask questions of our guests. Just go to Substack and search for Marking the Role. The link is also on the episode notes wherever you get your podcasts.
So, look, on watching the coronation on the weekend, I was horrified to hear the ABC commentators not describing the celebration, but making anti-royal comments and denigrating the event. Now, I'm just going to play a few for you and the listeners.
An institution that's perpetrated colonisation all around the world at the expense of First Nations peoples and people of colour.
Because the symbol of that crown represented the invasion, the theft of land, and in our case, the exterminating war, which next year will mark 200 years.
So many of our beautiful multicultural communities have also suffered, under this exact, a colonisation process and the like.
Now, this is in exact opposition to the history that you're talking about. It is our real history that you're trying to communicate. How do you feel when you hear things like this?
Well, Phil, I was watching the coronation on a commercial television station, and I can't tell you the amount of people I was getting texts from saying that they started watching it on the ABC and they were turning it off, changing channels because it was, so objectionable. So I didn't see the ABC coverage, but I have heard a lot about it, and formal complaints apparently are being made to the authorities, totally inappropriate. And again, it comes to the issue of balance. I was in awe of the occasion personally. I thought it was, outstanding and impressive in its, the traditions and the solemnness of it all. I thought it was fantastic. But it goes to the issue of this myopic and aggressively one-sided view of the world. So, and in my role of education, when you're talking about these things, there needs to be a balance in everything. And in my view, it certainly wasn't the time or place to be having that kind of conversation on the taxpayer's dollar.
Certainly not the place for it. I mean, it was a place of celebration. It was a time of celebration, and in some ways, you were left feeling let down and muddied by their broadcast.
Yeah, well, change channels. I don't support them.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the ultimate is remembering that we actually do have power in these things, and my understanding is the statistics of people who turned off the ABC was incredibly high.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they've lost all of their listeners for ABC radio breakfasts. that has plummeted across the nation. So people are really voting with their dials. Is there a case, do you think, for a teacher promoting one side of politics or one side of an ideological argument in a classroom? Is there ever a case for that?
No. Not, if I take that question on face value, the role of an educator is to educate, not to indoctrinate. And the only time I could ever think that you might present one case is if there has been something very strongly already given to them that you are then trying to balance. So, and I'll give you an example of that, where in the upcoming referendum on The Voice, schools are only receiving information on the Yes campaign. So they're receiving taxpayer-funded and union-funded speakers and curriculum resources. So in that situation, I think it would be appropriate for somebody to say, well, hang on, I will balance that and just give you the no case on the basis that you are already being, promoted the yes case. But as a proper answer to your question, no, the place of education is to give students the skill set to be able to make up their own mind.
Yeah, and by doing that, you have to present both sides, really, so that the student can make up their own mind and discuss it, in an informed manner.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of being a good educator, is that you present the information in a way that engages the students, and you can have open and critical conversation, which means that all facets of every situation can be freely and openly discussed. And quite often, if you do that well, yourself amongst conversations with adults, as you learn from other people, and you can quite often change your perspective on things through that iterative knowledge gain. So, but the idea of only presenting one ideology or one view of the world is simply indoctrination.
It's interesting you say that, because I was having a discussion with Professor Diana Kenny about how young people are reacting to viewpoints that they disagree with. And their reactions overwhelmingly are an emotional, complete denial and cancellation of the person. So that rather than try and understand an argument, which is perhaps what you and I were taught to do, and to listen to it, they won't listen to it, and they immediately cancel that person. So I think it's a pretty difficult job that we've got.
Well, it's a lack of skill set that because if you have the capability of constructing an argument and a position on anything. That's why debating has always been a good skill for students to be taught.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To take somebody else's point of view, whether you believe it or not, and to be able to present the case. It forces you to see the world from somebody else's perspective. And you may not agree with it, but at least you start to have some kind of understanding of it. Yeah. So if you're only ever receiving one side of any argument, you by nature become extreme in your position, because you don't know, and you have no opportunity to explore an alternative. So it's a total lack of skill set. It's also quite stressful, really. If you only have one view of the world, that becomes quite intense if you've never had the opportunity to explore other boundaries. And I sort of, students, the mental health illnesses amongst teenagers and the growth in that is well documented. And I would suggest that it's because we have pushed down their throats enormous amounts of negativity that, we're bad people with a bad past, the world's going to implode unless they do something soon. And it's one-sided view. There is no balance to it. There is no sort of other side of the coin to give them optimism and hope and gratefulness.
So what can parents do about this? I mean, can a parent print out your programs and take them to the school or the teacher if they feel there's a lack of balance in their child's lessons?
I would love them to. So our resources can be found at class-action.org.au, and they're freely available. There's sort of different lessons on, and just so your listeners know, we are developing and uploading them as we go. So we'll just keep adding as different topics come up. But yes, and as I said earlier, the resources cite the national curriculum. So we're not ever asking a teacher to, step outside the boundaries of their professional responsibilities. But parents and teachers can readily download any lesson that they'd like.
Colleen, there's going to be some teachers out there who say, look, bugger this. I'm having trouble getting my existing content into my day-to-day work with my class. That's a pretty understandable attitude, isn't it?
They have a very difficult gig, and there's a lot of negativity and public commentary about teachers and the education system. And I just want to give a shout out to those teachers, because they're doing what they have to do. No one expects, and we certainly don't at the IPA ever expect a teacher to step outside their professional obligations and implement the curriculum that they're, legally obliged to do so. And any teachers out there who are listening to your podcast, I'm very, very keen to hear from them at any time they can find me at the IPA.
Okay, so teachers can call you at the Institute of Public Affairs. These resources, so they're free for teachers. They'd also be free for parents, I guess. If some parents feel that the school is letting their students down by not giving them balance, the parents could actually teach it at home.
Absolutely. We have a lot of people who download our material who are homeschool parents.
Yeah.
And we've had grandparents who download them because they're interested in making sure that their grandchildren have an understanding of history that they don't think that the school is covering properly. They're very simply set out. The teacher resource is a pretty dry document that says step 1, step 2, step 3. It walks people exactly what to do. It has worksheets to show what the students will do. Some of them have got little videos to go with them or PowerPoint presentations to back it up. They're pretty simple resources for anybody to use.
That's great. Look, I'll put a link on the episode notes so that teachers can just go in and click on that. It'll go straight to it.
Marking the Role is supported entirely by subscribers and donors. It is a volunteer-run podcast and not even the host is paid. Subscription helps with transcript costs, podcast fees, and even the artificial intelligence voices like me used for teacher comments and ads like this. To support the podcast, please go to Substack, search for Marking the Role and subscribe, upgrade or donate. Your contribution really helps. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, well, those artificial intelligence voices are okay, but I think they can still be improved a bit. Now, Colleen, you cover history and perhaps law and parliamentary procedure, yet there's an emerging need for similar resources in science. Now, I had a message from a teacher in Victoria, I'm not going to say the region, and she said that one teacher at her school has taught her Year 6 class that sex is non-binary and that sex can change. Now, this teacher said she went to the principal and complained to the principal that, her colleague was doing this and was told that, I'm bombarded by work and I'll get to it sometime. So what we're getting is like, instead of a black armband version of science, we're getting a rainbow armband or a purple armband version of science to match this version of history. Is the IPA looking at broadening this range of resources?
So at the moment, our sort of focus has been history, civics and citizenship, but I do get a lot of parents expressing concern about some of the broader issues that their children are being exposed to. We have had suggestions. We've got one on Coons theory, which is beyond me, to be honest, that we're working on. But Charles Darwin's theories have also been suggested. They're all sort of works that are potentially in the pipeline that we'll have a look at. But we do get suggestions from time to time. And if I could just say, the overriding thing that to say to parents is, you're the parent. You are responsible for your child, and never let the school take over that role. So that means, there'll be increasingly plenty of times where, saying to your child, that's not what our family values. That's not what we want you to be doing. Or, having those constant conversations with your child, teaching them your values, your attitudes, because for a long time, bit by bit, schools have taken over the place of parenting. Now, decades ago, it started fairly sort of innocently, and it seemed like, helpful ideas that school would take over teaching your kid to swim or ride a bike or, go to England to play cricket or whatever it was. But it has become that school is the be-all and end-all, and parents often, everybody's busy, I understand that, but acquiesce to allow school to take such a powerful role in their child's life. And I would strongly encourage parents to be that nosy Parker parent who's always knowing what's going on with their child and what, attitudes or comments are being made, and, talk to the school about it and not accept it.
Colleen, there was a voice grab at the start of this episode from a teacher, Kerry, who didn't mind having to teach certain things that the department said that she had to do, but she drew the line when it came to the union telling her what she should teach, and she was listing a couple of things that she disagreed with. So it seems that if the department is not telling you, as a teacher, the ideology that you should be teaching, well, the union is. And I think the union has just recently, I could be wrong, come out in favour of the voice vote and expecting all teachers to follow suit.
But what I've heard is that the teachers' union they have made a statement that they're supporting the yes. Now, even in that, the union doesn't and ought not to be able to speak for every single teacher. That should not be a situation where they can tell the world how me as a teacher thinks.
No, that's exactly right. But individuals, some I believe, are scared to actually say what they actually think because, as you mentioned before, you'll be labelled a racist, and you actually, it's actually dividing society. And I'm very concerned about what the outcome could be.
It's a very common thing that I hear, particularly in the role that I have here at the IPA. I get loads of emails from parents and grandparents saying, thank you, so glad that somebody's bringing, shining a light on some of these issues because I can't do it. I can't say that out loud. So we have a situation in the community where people are genuinely concerned and too afraid to say what they think for fear of being labelled, particularly a racist or a bigot or a homophobe or any kind of phobe that you want, and it just shuts down the conversation. It's a very easy way to stop people from speaking.
Colleen, do you think that with all this ideology creeping into nearly every area of the curriculum, it's actually dumbing down the content, that it's actually making for a dumber society?
Phil, I've mentioned the cross-curriculum priorities. Now, in addition to undermining national pride and optimism about, our country, these cross-curriculum priorities pollute subject matter, and, there's a lack of integrity in academic integrity in the subject content. Now, the harm of that is that, our academic standards have been reducing at the rate of knots, really. The OECD PISA, which is the program for international student assessment, has shown that Australian students, the average 15-year-old, is more than a year behind where the average 15-year-old was in the year 2000. And that's in maths and science and reading. So in addition to the sort of the cultural issues, we also have, blatant results that show our academic standards are affected as well.
Colleen, I think most teachers would agree that the curriculum as it stands is fairly imbalanced. What could the Federal Minister for Education do to restore the balance?
Look, if I was the Minister for Education, I would be removing these cross-curriculum priorities and restoring integrity to the subject matter completely. I would remove them, and I would also introduce a dedicated subject in Year 9 of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders histories and cultures, and have it as a year-long dedicated subject, and so to return integrity to all of the other subjects and not the push of the ideology.
And you were listening to Colleen Harkin, Research Fellow for the Institute of Public Affairs and the head of the Class Action Programs. The Class Action Programs are really just resources for teachers to help balance out the national curriculum a little bit more. And you can contact Colleen by just emailing her at charkin, CHARKIN, at ipa.org.au. I'll put all these links too on the Substack Marking the Role page, and I'll also put links to where teachers can access for free all of those unit outlines. And also Colleen has regular meetings for teachers in Melbourne. I know it doesn't help anyone who lives in Perth and Darwin, but perhaps email her and find out, if you live in Melbourne, where those meetings are going to be, and go along and have your say. The Institute of Public Affairs costs around about $100 a year to become a member, but there's a special deal for listeners where you can get a membership for $55. Remember, those resources are free, though. You don't have to be a member for that, but $55 if you want to be a member, and I'll put the link also on the Substack Marking the Role page. Okay, so you've been listening to Marking the Role, episode 28, all about politics and ideology in the classroom. I know episode 29 was supposed to be on Generation Alpha and teaching Generation Z, but I was sick last week and had to have some time off, so we'll have one less episode for this term. Next episode will be on the Michaela School in the UK, and in a few days' time, Lee and I leave to go over to the UK and go to the Michaela School and speak to Catherine Purblesing, the principal of the Michaela School. Now, if you're not familiar with the Michaela School, it is a free school. So a free school, it does not come under the auspices of government schools, but it has fantastic reviews from teachers, from parents, and from students. So we'll be going to the Michaela School, which has very strict discipline policies, very big accountability expectations from the students, but also incredibly happy students and successful ones. So we'll be going there, and then we're having a holiday. We haven't had a holiday for probably 7 years. So we're going to be off down through Germany and finish off in Budapest. Marking the Role is only funded by donors and subscribers, and I really do urge you to help us keep going by becoming a subscriber at $35 for the year. Or there's a discount also if two of you join. So if two of you join, you get it for far less, I think. So it really does help us out, and I urge you to join us. It's far less than episodes of Netflix, far less. My name's Phil Dye. And I'll see you in about a week and a half, coming to you from the Michaela School in London. See you then.